Two friends vacationing by the sea live in a tent on the shore, having a good time. And after a heated argument between them, one of the friends leaves at night. The next day, a tourist makes a horrifying discovery: the body of a young female. In this video, I will tell you about the murder case of Анастасия Муженя.
19-летнюю девушку убили вы?
Да, это сделал я.
Hi friends, you're watching the Jonas channel, and before going further into this video, I'm gonna tell you that the viewer discretion is advised. As always, if you'll enjoy this video, please leave a like and subscribe at the end, and let's begin. Анастасия Муженя and Alena Popova were born and raised in the city of Pyatigorsk, in the southern part of Russia, and they have been friends since the first grade. Both of them loved music and painting and were practically inseparable. But as it often happens in adult life, the girls' paths diverged. Anastasia, or as everyone called her Nastya, went to pursue her career in Moscow, while Alena stayed in Pyatigorsk. However, they didn't lose touch with each other. They would sometimes call each other on the phone and communicated on social networks. As their friends recalled, when Alena and Nastya met, they always had a blast and didn't hesitate to consume large amounts of alcohol. And the connection between them maintained for many years, although they didn't have much opportunities to see each other for the past years. It so happened that after some time after moving to Moscow, Anastasia started working as a stripper, but she quickly grew tired of this job and decided to return to her hometown. Then she wrote to Alena telling her about her difficult life. In addition to the problems at work, she had also broken up with her boyfriend. Alena was vacationing with a large group of people on the Black Sea coast at the time, and suggested to her friend that she come to the city of Adler to unwind. Anastasia agreed. Adler is a small resort town on the Black Sea coast. The Black Sea is the most popular vacation spot for Russians, and every year from May to September, millions of them head to its shores. More financially well-off people choose expensive resorts like Sochi. Those with less money go to cheaper towns like Adler, where there are many entertainment establishments on the coast, with cheap food and alcohol, surrounded by inexpensive hotels. Since Soviet times, camping on the Black Sea has become popular, where people, in order to save on accommodation, simply bring tents with them and live on the beach, swimming, relaxing, and spending the night right there in the tent. This is exactly how Alena suggested spending few days by the Black Sea to Nastya. Nastya didn't hesitate for too long. She packed her things and arrived on August 26, 2017. The next day, Nastya and Alena reached a beach near the Orleanak camp on the shore of the Black Sea. However, they didn't like it there. It was too crowded. So they moved further along the coast to a wild stony beach and set up a tent there. Locals considered this beach to be nudist-friendly. The tent was small but sufficient for spending a couple of nights, and presumably Nastya and Alena had very little money with them. On August 28th, during the day, locals saw them swimming in the sea near their tent and having fun. After some time, two young guys, Dmitry Kozachenko and Elman Kurbanov, passed by on a motorboat. Nastya and Alena waved to them, and the guys came closer to introduce themselves. After that, the young people agreed to meet in the evening at a small hookah lounge on the beach, which belonged to Dmitry's brother. Dmitry also came to the south to visit his relatives. He lived and worked in Moscow, and Elman used to work as a security guard in Dmitry's brother's cafe, but later started a small business supplying hookahs to several local establishments. Towards the evening, they called the girls, met them at a local grocery store, where they bought a few groceries. It was also later found out that Nastya and Alena also stole some food from that store. And after that, all of them went to the hookah lounge. And because the surveillance cameras were installed in this establishment, some of the events from that evening were partially captured on the recording. Around 10 in the evening, the camera in the hookah lounge recorded how the whole group, Nastya, Alena, Elman and Dmitry, entered the establishment, and Dmitry greeted someone from his acquaintances. Everyone looked relaxed and in a cheerful mood. There, all four of them had pizza for dinner and had consumed alcohol. It's worth noting that before the meeting, Alona and Nastya had consumed 1.5 liters of wine on the beach, and they drank even more with Dmitry and Elman. Events that evening unfolded rapidly, and by 11 p.m., Nastya and Elman had scheduled themselves in the restroom. When they returned, Dmitry mentioned that he needed to move his car, and Nastya, deciding to take a stroll, accompanied him. During their absence for a few minutes, Alona and Elman also found connection, and intimacy occurred between them as well. Soon, Nastya and Dmitry returned, and she learned about what had happened between Elman and Alona, which presumably triggered a bout of jealousy in her. Soon after, Alona began urging Nastya to return to the tent, but she didn't want to. Elman and Dmitry offered them to spend the night at the lounge, but Alona told them that they had to leave at 5 in the morning, so they couldn't stay. Because all of this, Alona and Nastya started arguing. Alona was screaming and acted aggressively towards Nastya, while she remained calm. In the end, the friends bid farewell to the guys and left, declining their offer to accompany them. The moment when they left was also captured on surveillance cameras. You can see that the girls were somewhat agitated as they left the establishment, and it is obvious that no one went with them. This happened at 12:40 a.m. After that, in the video, it is noticeable how Dmitry closes the hookah lounge, takes out empty pizza boxes and other trash. Then, sitting on the fence, he waits for Elman, and they leave the establishment together. There are no signs that they attempted to catch up with Nastya and Alona, for example, to continue the evening with them. And then, along with Elman, they went to meet another acquaintance, with whom they stayed until 3 in the morning. This was also captured on the camera. But what happened to Nastya and Alona that night is harder to determine. The journey from the hookah lounge to their tent took approximately 20 minutes. But at night, in the darkness, along the stony beach, it took much longer. They reached the tent in about 30-40 minutes, and likely on the way, their argument escalated, fueled by alcohol. What happened that night in the tent on the stony beach near Adler has become a part of a long-standing investigation that is still being questioned to this day. On the next day, one of the tourists noticed that a tent where Alona and Nastya had stayed yesterday was broken. He probably saw two females swimming near that tent the day before. Initially, this man likely thought that the girls were spending time in the town. But after several hours, this tourist began to worry about why no one had appeared near the tent for such a long time. Around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, he decided to look inside, and what he saw shocked him. He saw a body which, as it was later found out, belonged to Nastya Muzhenya, and the tent from the inside and the items there were covered with blood. This man called the police right away. When law enforcement and onlookers gathered around the tent, Dmitry and Elman, by coincidence, were again passing by in a boat and noticed that a crowd had gathered near the tent where Nastya and Alona had spent the night. As Dmitry later stated in his testimony, they wanted to see if the girls left or not. Approaching the shore, they were informed that the body was found in the tent. When Dmitry was allowed to look inside of that tent, he recognized Anastasia's body, and he told the police officers that there was another female with her. Elman, on the spot for some reason, told the police that Alona could be involved in the crime. He and Dmitry didn't hide the fact that the previous night they spent time with the victim and her friend, and they also mentioned that Alona's behavior towards Nastya seemed dominant and aggressive to them. Later, a forensic expert would conclude that Anastasia Muzhenya died from an open cranial brain injury inflicted by a blunt, solid object with uneven but not sharp edges, possibly a stone. Her death occurred between 1 a.m. and 2 a.m. It was determined that she had not been sexually assaulted, but Elman's DNA was found on her body, which could be explained by their interaction that evening. Furthermore, it was later established by experts following an examination that the person who inflicted the blows was most likely a female or a man of non-robust build. This was established because the first 2 blows to the head were not fatal, despite the fact that, judging by the crime scene, the victim didn't put up much resistance. As for the weapon used in the crime, considering that everything occurred on a stony beach, it is most likely that the rock used by the perpetrator was thrown into the sea. And, of course, the salt water washed away all of the DNA evidence. Given that the seafloor is also covered in rocks, finding the crime weapon now is impossible. On that same morning, Nastya's mother, Larissa, started calling her daughter, and when she couldn't reach her, she then dialed Alena's phone, but there was no answer there either. Through the day, Larissa was calling these 2 numbers, but both of them were offline. In the evening, police officers called Larissa and told her that her daughter is dead. After that, Nastya's sister, Natalia, started calling Alena and her mother, and she couldn't reach them either. She then asked her son to pay them a visit to see what happened. And when he did this, he found out that Alena was at home and she was sleeping. She only called back in the evening, and when Nastya's aunt answered the phone, she told Alena about her friend's death, but she reacted to this information somewhat coldly. Afterward, Alena started communicating on social media with her acquaintances, informing them that Nastya had been killed in the tent where they were staying. But it was out of character for her to actively engage in messaging on social media. Nevertheless, Alena wrote and sent voice messages to her friends, recounting that on their way to the tent, she and Nastya had an argument, and Nastya had treated her poorly, throwing Alena's belongings out of the tent and driving her away, which forced her to find her way home by hitchhiking. In general, Alena's version of events was that after the argument with Nastya, she gathered her belongings and left because she had nowhere to stay on the beach. It seemed that she wasn't much grieving the death of her friend, as she was trying to convey her version of what happened to as many people as possible. Soon the police detained Alena for questioning. At the time, she was being treated as a witness, just like Dmitry and Elman. According to Alena, Nastya allegedly had a fit of rage, calling her immoral and accusing her of behaving like a prostitute. Nastya also expressed her reluctance to spend the night in the same tent with Alena. In her statements, Alena mentioned that she packed her belongings while Nastya was on the phone with someone and left. She also said that she, before leaving, left a note for Nastya in the tent, supposedly for her to read in the morning. The note was found by detectives during the crime scene investigation. The note began with the words, "Good luck, bro." And then Alena wrote that there was nothing between her and Elman, and she told about all of it as a joke, not knowing that Nastya was so drunk. And supposedly she wanted to leave this note in the tent so that in the morning, when Nastya sobered up, she could read it. She claimed to have written this note on the way to the beach, although she later changed her statement and said that she wrote it near the tent when she was already leaving. She also said that she then took the food which they had stolen from the store and hastily left the beach. Then, according to her account, Alena hitchhiked a ride with a passing car in which there were 3 men. On the way, for some reason, she told her fellow passengers about the conflict with her friend Nastya that had just occurred. The police became interested in the fact that, according to Alena, Nastya was on the phone with one of her acquaintances during the conflict. They managed to determine that this person was a man named Emmanuel Brochet. When the police contacted him, he told them that Nastya said goodbye to him with the words, "Wait, Alena came back for her things," and then hung up. But later this man changed his initial statement and said that he couldn't remember what she told him exactly. On the following day, on August 30, 2017, a search was conducted at Alena's house, during which pink striped trousers with brown spots were seized. There were several bloodstains the size of a match head on these pants. According to the results of the examination, blood from the deceased Anastasia Muzhenya was found on these trousers. Alena later explained that they shared a wardrobe, including underwear, and possibly at some point Anastasia left her blood on them. She was even able to provide 2 photographs as evidence, and in them, presumably she and Nastya were wearing those pants. However, a sweat and fat examination concluded that the sweat on the trousers belonged solely to Alena Popova, so it was ruled out that Anastasia had been wearing these pants recently, since traces of sweat and grease remain on clothing even if a person has worn it for a few seconds only once. Therefore, Nastya had not worn those pants, at least since the last time they were washed. So Alena's explanation that the blood got on those pants when Alena wore them last time was at least unconvincing. Detectives also found a sheet in which Alena had wrapped all her belongings when packing them before leaving the tent, and a small brown bloodstain with Anastasia's blood was found on it. The defense tried to explain this by suggesting that because Nastya often stayed at Alena's home, she might have left the bloodstain on the sheet naturally because she slept on them. However, since Nastya had been living in Moscow for a long time, it seemed strange that this sheet wasn't washed for such a long period of time. During the search, the officer that was conducting it also noticed Alena's fake nails because it was obvious that they had been completely removed. Alena explained that such nails are usually unglued rather than removed by cutting. But this time, for some reason, she didn't have time to remove them, so she just cut all of her nails off. The trimmed nail fragments were never found, so it was impossible to extract biological traces from under them. It is also worth mentioning that Nastya's mother, Larissa, also tried to retrieve her daughter's computer from Alena, but she initially refused to return it. After some time, Alena handed Nastya's computer to her mother, but surprisingly the hard drive was damaged, so it was impossible to extract any information from it. On that same day, Alena was brought to the town Tuapse, which is located not far from Adler, because the police wanted to question her. At the time, she was considered to be a witness, but her family decided to hire her a good lawyer. She was accommodated in a hotel by police, where she stayed until September 1st, 2017. There, she was offered to undergo a polygraph test, to which she unexpectedly agreed. During the test, the expert concluded that Alena was concealing certain facts from the investigation, and that she had also engaged in intentional actions that caused bodily harm to Nastya, including blows to the head. Soon after this, Alena was arrested as a suspect. The defense attempted to explain the failed polygraph test by suggesting that Alena had been held in isolation for 3 days without food and was under psychological pressure. But the police had confirmation that Alena received 3 meals a day in the hotel, and there was no pressure on her. This case received significant attention, largely due to the efforts of Alena's relatives and lawyers, who reached out to various media outlets, appeared on television shows, and waged a full-scale battle on various social media platforms. Thanks to the attention of the press and the public, new versions of the crime began to emerge. Some residents of the area where the crime occurred and people who often vacationed there told stories about a madman living in a makeshift cabin about 100 meters up the cliff from the crime scene. He would sometimes appear and disappear for long periods of time, and people who encountered him considered him to be creepy and tried to avoid this man. And local residents were outraged that the police were suspecting fragile Alena while no one had even searched for the man from the cabin. There were also several trails leading down to the beach from the cabin, which the perpetrator could have used to descend to the beach on the night of the murder. Also considering the fact that Nastya and Alena had been relaxing and sunbathing for a couple of days before the crime, a person from the cabin could have been observing them. The events caused such a strong public resonance that television shows about the crime broke all their rating records. Most of the participants in these shows, and often even the hosts, refused to believe that Alena had committed the murder. However, during one of the shows, something unexpected even for such TV programs occurred. 21-year-old Vladimir Cherkasov confessed to the murder of Anastasia right there on the live air. It was revealed that Cherkasov had been the third passenger in the taxi that Alena had taken home on the night of the attack. This show was strange and absurd from the very beginning. Initially, viewers were told that Vladimir Cherkasov had fled to Latin America after the murder, but allegedly he later contacted the show's producers to make a confession. The show also included the use of a lie detector, but there was no explanation as to why Vladimir decided to make a confession himself and return to Russia for it, considering he was not implicated in the case. At the beginning of the show, it was stated that if the lie detector confirmed that what he was saying was true, he would be arrested right there in the studio. During the show, Vladimir made a confession and revealed that he was the third passenger in the car Alona took on her way back home at night. He heard Alona's account of her argument with her friend and found out that Nastya was left alone on the beach. Supposedly afterwards, he left the car and went to the beach that same night with no ill intentions. However, Nastya, frightened by the unfamiliar man, screamed, and in fear, he, for some reason, threw several large rocks at the tent. The whole story sounded absurd from the very beginning. After the show, Vladimir was taken to the police station and interrogated. But a police source reported that investigators believed that his confession was a staged act for a television show, and presumably no further investigation regarding Vladimir Cherkasov was conducted after this. It is very hard to tell, is there any part of that show that was true, and it even wasn't proven that Vladimir was a passenger in the car that Alona took on the night of the murder. Because initially, when the police officers questioned her, she said that there were 2 men in the car, and Vladimir was not among them. No matter what, Alona's family desperately clung to this version, but the police still ignored it. But anyway, it is possible that this whole story was just created by the TV producers to make more money on the highly discussed topic. Alona's defense also insisted that there were numerous inconsistencies in the case. For example, it was alleged that there were no traces of alcohol found in Nastya's body. However, if the crime occurred around 1 a.m., considering how much she had been drinking, it was highly unlikely that she had completely sobered up by that time. Alona's defense, her family, and the public exerted strong psychological pressure on the court, as well as on the relatives of Anastasia, her lawyer, and witnesses. For instance, after receiving a call from Alona's attorney and boyfriend, Emmanuel Brochet, who was Nastya's friend and spoke to her for the last time on the night of the murder, changed his initial statements in court, denying that Nastya's last words on the phone were, "Wait, Alona has returned for her things." The defense also put forward various versions of what had happened and accused other individuals allegedly involved in the crime. One such version involved a couple near a bonfire, which Alona claimed to have seen on the beach on her way to the tent. However, during the inspection on the crime scene, no traces of a bonfire were found, and also Anastasia Muzhenya's phone was discovered. The calls and messages on the phone indicated that after Alona left the tent, Nastya had no further communication with anyone and did not respond to calls. So it was very unlikely that she lived for a long period of time after Alona left. In general, the defense's efforts to exonerate Popova were unsuccessful. The evidence collected by the investigation, including the bloodstains and the surveillance footage, was enough for the court to reach a verdict. During the trial, Alona claimed that she loved her friend very much, but she refused to testify during the trial, citing her constitutional rights. She never admitted her guilt, and in her last word, she just said, "I did not kill this person," which is a strange thing to say about your dead friend. In December of 2019, the District Court of Tuapse found Alona Popova guilty of murdering Anastasia Muzhenya. She was sentenced to 8 years in prison. And in May of 2020, the higher court upheld this decision. In August of 2021 and in March of 2022, Alona submitted requests for the early release on parole because she already had right to, but both times her requests were denied. She is still serving her sentence in one of the Russian prisons. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye.